"By summer, you will birth our son," the giant rancher declared to the trembling girl, his voice cutting through the prairie wind like a blade. The black obese girl had endured years of cruel whispers in Dusty Hollow, deemed unmarriageable, destined for kitchen servitude until death. Yet this towering widower, whose wealth commanded respect across 3 counties, had chosen her over every eligible woman in town. His dead wife's name haunts his lips, and strange recognition flickers in his eyes when he looks upon the girl. The town watches with morbid fascination as two outcasts, she scorned for her appearance, he haunted by mysterious grief, forge an alliance that threatens to unravel secrets buried deeper than any grave. But someone from their shared past has been watching, waiting. Can the girl survive the truth behind his desperate proposition, or will the summer sun rise on her destruction? Sarah Mee Clemens scrubbed the boarding house floors while whispers followed her every move. The women of Dusty Hollow spoke in hushed tones about the large black girl who would never find a husband. Margaret Whitmore watched from the kitchen doorway with eyes that burned with something deeper than disgust. "Faster, girl. These floors won't clean themselves." Margaret's voice carried a venom that seemed personal. She always watched Sarah Mee with particular intensity, as if searching for something hidden beneath the surface. The morning sun cast long shadows across the wooden planks as Sarah Mee worked. Her knees ached from hours of scrubbing, but she had learned long ago that complaint only brought more cruelty. The boarding house served as the town's gathering place, and she had become invisible furniture to most visitors. 3 ranch hands sat at the corner table discussing cattle prices. Sarah Mee listened carefully while pretending to focus on her work. Knowledge was the only currency she possessed, gathered in stolen moments between chores and humiliation. "That northern pasture needs rotating," one man said. "Grass won't last through summer otherwise." Sarah Mee filed the information away with countless other fragments she had collected over the years. Her exceptional memory served as both gift and curse, preserving every slight alongside useful knowledge. Margaret appeared beside her with sudden silence that made Sarah Mee flinch. "You think you're clever, don't you? Listening to conversations that don't concern you." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Sarah Mee kept her eyes down, knowing that meeting Margaret's gaze would only invite more trouble. Something about her presence in this town seemed to offend Margaret on a level that went beyond normal prejudice. "Your kind always thinks they're owed something," Margaret continued. "But debts have a way of coming due." The cryptic words sent chills down Sarah Mee's spine. Margaret often spoke as if she knew secrets about Sarah Mee's past that even Sarah Mee herself had forgotten. The boarding house owner treated her with the particular cruelty reserved for personal enemies, not mere servants. News of the stranger's arrival rippled through town like wildfire. Ezekiel Thompson owned 3,000 acres and commanded respect from every merchant and rancher within 50 miles. His first wife had died 2 years prior, leaving him without an heir to claim his vast holdings. Sarah Mee watched from the kitchen window as eligible women paraded past his hotel room. Each carried hopes of becoming the next Mrs. Thompson, securing their family's futures through marriage to the wealthiest man in the territory. The parade lasted 3 days, but none emerged with good news. "Strange," Margaret muttered, standing beside Sarah Mee at the window. "A man like that should have his pick." The giant rancher walked the streets alone, his massive frame casting shadows that seemed to swallow smaller men whole. He spoke little and smiled less, conducting his business with the efficiency of someone carrying invisible burdens. When he looked toward the boarding house, his eyes held an intensity that made Sarah Mee step back from the window. Margaret's reaction proved even more telling. The older woman's face drained of color whenever Thompson's gaze fell upon the building. Her hands trembled as she gripped the window frame, knuckles white with tension. "Some ghosts refuse to stay buried," Margaret whispered. The town's social gathering arrived with all the fanfare Dusty Hollow could manage. Sarah Mee served refreshments while trying to remain invisible among the celebrating crowd. The event provided cover for her usual practice of listening to important conversations, but tonight felt different. Thompson stood near the punch bowl, declining dance invitations with polite but firm refusals. His presence dominated the room despite his silence, drawing curious glances from every unmarried woman and their ambitious mothers. Sarah Me couldn't help but notice how his eyes seemed to track her movements across the room. Mrs. Henderson's voice carried above the music. "That Thompson fellow is particular, I'll give him that. Turned down my daughter without so much as a proper conversation." "Perhaps he's still mourning," another woman suggested. "Some men never recover from losing their first love." Sarah Me stumbled while collecting empty glasses, drawing unwanted attention to herself. Laughter erupted from a group of young women who found endless entertainment in her clumsiness. The humiliation burned her cheeks as she hurried toward the kitchen. "Look at her," someone whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Poor thing probably dreams of finding a husband. As if any man would want damaged goods like that." The words struck like physical blows, each one designed to remind her of her place in the social order. Sarah Me kept walking, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her tears. Margaret waited in the kitchen doorway with a satisfied smile, having witnessed the entire humiliation. "This is where you belong," Margaret said. "Best you remember that before you start getting ideas above your station." The evening air offered little relief as Sarah Me stepped outside to empty wash basins. Thompson's massive silhouette appeared in the moonlight, blocking her path back to the boarding house. His presence should have frightened her, but something in his expression held recognition rather than threat. "By summer, you will birth our son." The declaration hit her like thunder across clear skies. Sarah Me's hands trembled, nearly dropping the basin she carried. Thompson's eyes held certainty that defied explanation, as if he possessed knowledge about her future that she herself lacked. The town would explode with scandal by morning. Her only choices had always been lifelong servitude or leaving with nothing. Now this mysterious giant offered a third option that seemed impossible to believe. The news spread through Dusty Hollow like wildfire. Ezekiel Thompson had chosen Sarah Me Clemens as his bride. The town buzzed with disbelief and barely concealed outrage at his decision. Sarah Me sat in her small room above the boarding house kitchen, staring at the simple dress Thompson had sent. The fabric felt foreign against her calloused hands. She had accepted his proposal without fully understanding why he had chosen her, but something in his eyes suggested answers would come. Margaret Whitmore paced the hallway outside like a caged animal. Her footsteps echoed with increasing agitation as she muttered under her breath. The boarding house owner had barely spoken since Thompson's announcement, but her fury radiated through every gesture. "You think this changes anything?" Margaret finally burst into the room without knocking. "You think putting on fancy clothes makes you worthy of respect?" Sarah Me continued packing her few belongings into a worn carpetbag. Margaret's reaction seemed excessive even for someone losing a servant. The older woman's hatred carried personal weight that went beyond simple prejudice. "There are things about your family you don't know," Margaret hissed. "Sins that demand payment." The cryptic threat hung in the air as Sarah Me faced her tormentor. Margaret's eyes held secrets that seemed ready to spill, but she bit back whatever revelation had nearly escaped her lips. Thompson's business associates gathered at the hotel to express their concerns. Sarah Me could see them through the window, their animated gestures suggesting heated discussion about his choice. Several men gestured toward the boarding house with obvious disapproval. The merchant families who had hoped to secure Thompson's fortune through their daughters now plotted alternative strategies. Mrs. Henderson led a group of prominent women in whispered conversations that stopped whenever Thompson appeared. Their smiles became forced, their courtesy strained. Sarah Me recognized the danger. These people wielded social power that could destroy Thompson's business relationships. His choice had consequences that extended far beyond personal preference. Thompson arrived at sunset to escort her to his ranch. His massive frame filled the boarding house doorway as he waited patiently for her to gather courage. Margaret watched from the shadows with eyes that promised this wasn't finished. The journey to Bear's Den Ranch passed in relative silence. Thompson seemed lost in thoughts that carved deep lines across his weathered face. Sarah Mee studied his profile, searching for clues about his mysterious motivation. "You're wondering why I chose you," he said without looking in her direction. Sarah Mee nodded, grateful he had addressed the obvious question hanging between them. All will be explained in time. Some truths require proper setting. The ranch house appeared through the darkness like something from a dream. 2 stories of solid timber construction spoke of prosperity and permanence. Sarah Mee had never imagined living in such a place. Thompson's belongings filled rooms with the accumulated memories of a life she knew nothing about. Sarah Mee explored the house while he tended to ranch business, her curiosity drawing her toward personal items that might explain his choice. A music box sat on the bedroom dresser, its melody hauntingly familiar. The tune stirred memories she couldn't quite grasp, fragments of childhood that had been buried beneath years of survival. Her exceptional memory began working backward, searching for connections. The locket lay hidden beneath folded linens in the bottom drawer. Sarah Mee's hands trembled as she opened the delicate gold clasp. The photograph inside showed a woman who could have been Sarah Mee's reflection, but older and wearing clothes from another time. Recognition hit like lightning across a clear sky. The face belonged to memories from her earliest childhood, fragments of a sister who had disappeared when Sarah Mee was barely old enough to understand loss. Annabelle had been her protector, her teacher, her anchor in a world that seemed determined to destroy them both. Thompson found her holding the locket when he returned from the barn. His expression confirmed what the photograph had revealed. The woman in the picture connected them through bonds deeper than any marriage arrangement. "Annabelle was your wife," Sarah Mee whispered. Thompson nodded, settling into a chair across from her. The weight of grief still clung to his shoulders like an invisible burden he carried everywhere. "She spoke of you constantly. Her little sister with the perfect memory who could recall every story, every lesson, every moment they shared together." The memories came flooding back with startling clarity. Annabelle teaching her to remember everything because knowledge meant survival. Annabelle whispering promises that she would return someday to take Sarah Mee away from their circumstances. Annabelle disappearing one night, leaving only whispered hopes that she had found freedom. "She made me promise to find you," Thompson continued, "to protect you the way she couldn't when you were children." The arrangement suddenly made perfect sense. Thompson hadn't chosen her randomly or out of pity. He had sought her out deliberately, fulfilling a promise to the woman he had loved and lost. "She died giving birth to our son," Thompson's voice broke slightly. "Her last words were about you, about making sure you found the life she wanted for both of you." Sarah Mee closed her eyes, allowing the truth to reshape everything she thought she knew about her situation. She wasn't charity or convenience. She was family, connected to Thompson through love that transcended death. The locket felt warm in her palm as understanding replaced confusion. Annabelle had found her freedom and tried to extend it to the sister she had been forced to leave behind. Now Sarah Mee held the opportunity her sister had died hoping to provide. Thompson waited patiently while she processed the revelation. Outside, the ranch stretched toward horizons that suddenly seemed achievable rather than impossible. The ranch hands gathered around the corral at dawn, their skeptical faces telling Sarah Mee everything she needed to know. 5 weathered men who had worked this land for years now watched a woman they considered an outsider attempt to prove her worth. Carlos, the foreman, crossed his arms while studying her with obvious doubt. His loyalty to Thompson ran deep, but that didn't mean he trusted the boss's judgment about bringing Sarah Mee into their operation. "Mrs. Thompson wants to learn ranch operations," Thompson announced to the assembled crew. Murmurs of disapproval rippled through the group. These men had seen wealthy wives before, women who played at ranching until the novelty wore thin. Sarah Mee recognized their assumption and felt determination rise within her chest. The first test came with the morning cattle count. Sarah Mee accompanied Carlos to the north pasture, where 200 head grazed across rolling hills. The foreman expected her to struggle with the task, perhaps giving up when the work proved more difficult than anticipated. Sarah Mee studied the herd with intense focus. Her exceptional memory began cataloging details that escaped casual observation. She noticed patterns in their movement, identified individual animals by distinctive markings, and calculated numbers with the precision that had helped her survive years of hardship. 193 head, she announced after completing her count. Carlos rechecked his own tally twice before admitting she was correct. The missing cattle represented a significant loss that demanded immediate attention. "How did you learn to count livestock so quickly?" Carlos asked, his skepticism beginning to shift toward curiosity. Sarah Mee explained her years of listening to ranch conversations at the boarding house. Every discussion about cattle management, every complaint about lost profits, every solution to common problems had been stored in her memory like books in a library. The theoretical knowledge impressed the crew, but practical application would provide the real test. Sarah Mee volunteered to help repair damaged fencing in the east section, work that required both physical endurance and technical skill. Her hands bled within the first hour. The wire cut deep, and the posts fought every attempt to drive them into the hard ground. But Sarah Mee refused to quit, drawing on reserves of determination that had carried her through years of kitchen labor. By noon, she had completed more fence repair than Carlos expected from a newcomer. Her technique improved with each post, and her persistence earned grudging respect from men who had initially dismissed her capabilities. "You work harder than most hired hands," admitted Jake, the youngest crew member. The discovery came during the lunch break. Sarah Mee noticed fresh horse tracks near the damaged fence line that didn't match any of their ranch horses. The tracks led toward the canyon where missing cattle might be hidden from casual searches. She brought her observations to Thompson, who studied the evidence with growing concern. Organized cattle theft required coordination and local knowledge that suggested enemies rather than random criminals. "Someone's been watching our routines," Thompson concluded. "They know when sections are least protected." Sarah Mee's analytical mind began working through the problem like solving a complex puzzle. The pattern of thefts coincided with specific events and timing that indicated inside knowledge of ranch operations. Strange incidents escalated throughout the week. Supply deliveries went missing before reaching the ranch. Tools disappeared from work sites. Mysterious riders appeared on distant ridges, watching the property through spyglasses before vanishing into the landscape. The crew's initial skepticism towards Sarah Mee transformed into protective concern as threats mounted. These men had accepted her as part of their extended family, and attacks on the ranch felt personal to everyone involved. Sarah Mee found Anna Bell's diary hidden in a trunk beneath winter clothing. The leather-bound journal contained her sister's thoughts during the final months of her life, including fears that someone from their past might discover her new identity. The entries revealed Anna Bell's growing paranoia about being watched. She described nightmares about returning to captivity and worries that her happiness was too fragile to last. Her handwriting became increasingly urgent as she sensed approaching danger. "Someone knows who I really am," Anna Bell had written. "The past refuses to stay buried, no matter how far we run from it." Thompson found Sarah Mee reading the diary by lamplight, tears streaming down her face as she absorbed her sister's final fears. He sat beside her without speaking, offering silent support while she processed the painful revelations. "She was terrified of being found," Sarah Mee whispered, "but she never told you why." Thompson admitted that Anna Bell had kept secrets about her past that she claimed were too dangerous to share. He had respected her privacy, never pushing for details that caused her obvious distress. The diary contained clues about their shared childhood that Sarah Mee's memory began connecting to current events. References to the widow's revenge and family debts suggested their troubles weren't random misfortune but calculated persecution. Sarah Mee realized the ranch attacks had begun shortly after her arrival, as if her presence had triggered someone's long-dormant hatred. The timing couldn't be coincidental when considered alongside Annabelle's fears about discovery. Whoever tormented Annabelle is now targeting me, Sarah Mee concluded. They followed the connection from her to you to me. Thompson's expression hardened as he understood the implications. His wife's death might not have been the natural tragedy he had believed. Someone with knowledge of their family history was systematically destroying everything Annabelle had built. The crew doubled their vigilance, as evidence mounted that they faced organized enemies rather than random criminals. Sarah Mee's integration into ranch operations had proven successful, but external threats now endangered everything they were trying to build together. Sarah Mee studied the diary late into the night, searching for clues that might identify their tormentor before the attacks escalated beyond property damage into direct violence against the people she had come to care about. The attacks intensified with calculated precision. Fences appeared cut in patterns that forced the cattle toward specific valleys where rustlers waited. Supply wagons suffered broken wheels on remote stretches of road where help would be hours away. Someone with intimate knowledge of ranch operations orchestrated each incident. Sarah Mee mapped the incidents on paper, her analytical mind searching for connections that others missed. The timing corresponded with her daily routines, as if someone watched her movements and planned accordingly. Every place she visited became a target within days. Carlos discovered poisoned water troughs in the south pasture during his morning rounds. The contamination would have killed dozens of cattle if not detected early. The foreman's face reflected grim understanding that their enemies had escalated beyond theft into deliberate destruction. "This isn't about money anymore," Carlos told Thompson. "Someone wants to destroy everything you've built." Thompson increased patrols and hired additional guards, but the attacks continued with supernatural timing. Their enemies seemed to anticipate every defensive measure, staying always one step ahead of their preparations. Sarah Mee volunteered to ride fence-line patrol despite Thompson's concerns for her safety. The morning sun painted the landscape in golden hues as she guided her horse along familiar paths, searching for signs of intrusion. The rabbit hole appeared without warning. Her horse stumbled, throwing Sarah Mee hard against the rocky ground. Pain exploded through her left side as she rolled to a stop near a cluster of sharp stones. The horse bolted toward home, leaving her alone with injuries that made standing nearly impossible. Carlos found her 2 hours later, semi-conscious and struggling to remain upright. The ride back to the ranch house jolted every broken rib, but Sarah Mee bit back cries of pain that would only increase everyone's worry. Dr. Morrison arrived from town as the sun reached its peak. His examination revealed cracked ribs and severe bruising, but more serious concerns emerged during his private conversation with Thompson afterward. Sarah Mee overheard fragments through the thin bedroom walls. Words like internal damage and childbearing impossible drifted through the wooden barrier, carrying implications that threatened everything she thought she understood about her arrangement with Thompson. The revelation struck harder than her physical injuries. Thompson had specifically mentioned birthing his son, making heir production the cornerstone of their agreement. Without that capability, her value to him disappeared like smoke in wind. She waited for Thompson to visit her bedside with news of their arrangement's termination. Any rational man would seek annulment rather than remain tied to a woman who couldn't fulfill her primary obligation. The hours passed in anxious anticipation of inevitable abandonment. Thompson finally appeared at sunset, carrying a tray of soup and wearing an expression that revealed nothing about his intentions. He settled into the bedside chair with gentle movements that suggested he planned an extended conversation. "Dr. Morrison explained your condition," he began quietly. Sarah Mee braced herself for dismissal, already planning her return to whatever life awaited beyond the ranch boundaries. The brief taste of belonging had been sweeter than she deserved, but reality demanded acceptance of her limitations. "I want you to know this changes nothing between us," Thompson continued. "Our arrangement was built on more than producing heirs." The unexpected declaration left Sarah me speechless. She had prepared for rejection, not acceptance of circumstances that eliminated her perceived usefulness. "Annabelle taught me that family extends beyond blood relations," Thompson explained. "Love creates bonds stronger than obligation." Relief flooded through Sarah me like warm water over frozen ground. The fear of abandonment receded, replaced by gratitude for acceptance she had never experienced before. Thompson's commitment transcended practical considerations into something approaching genuine affection. During her recovery, Sarah me studied Annabelle's diary with renewed intensity. Her sister's fears about discovery seemed increasingly relevant as attacks escalated beyond coincidence into personal vendetta territory. References to the widow's wrath appeared throughout Annabelle's final entries. The mysterious enemy had female characteristics that narrowed the field of potential suspects significantly. Annabelle had feared a woman's revenge more than random criminal activity. Sarah Me's exceptional memory began connecting fragments from her childhood with clues from the diary. Images of a stern-faced white woman emerged from buried recollections, someone who had watched Sarah Me and Annabelle with particular hatred during their earliest years. The woman's face crystallized in Sarah Me's memory as she recalled specific incidents of unusual cruelty. Someone who had taken their suffering personally, as if their very existence offended her sense of natural order. Margaret Whitmore's behavior suddenly made perfect sense. The boarding house owner's excessive hatred, her cryptic comments about family sins, her agitation upon Thompson's arrival all pointed toward personal history that extended beyond simple prejudice. Sarah Me realized that Margaret knew exactly who she was from the moment she arrived in Dusty Hollow. The years of targeted cruelty represented ongoing punishment for crimes Sarah Me didn't understand, but had apparently inherited through family connection. The timing of ranch attacks corresponding with Sarah Me's presence revealed Margaret as the orchestrator of their troubles. She had followed the connection from Annabelle to Thompson to Sarah Me, seeking revenge that spanned decades and crossed state boundaries. Thompson listened with growing alarm as Sarah Me laid out her theory. The evidence formed a convincing pattern that explained both Annabelle's fears and their current troubles through single source of persistent hatred. "Margaret Whitmore has been hunting our family for years," Sarah Me concluded. "She won't stop until she destroys everything Annabelle built and punishes me for whatever sins she believes we committed." The realization that their enemy had been hiding in plain sight, orchestrating their troubles from the very town where Sarah Me had sought refuge, sent chills through Thompson's weathered frame. Sarah Me's investigation required stealth that her injuries made nearly impossible. She convinced Thompson to let her return to town under the pretense of recovering medical supplies. Her real mission involved gathering evidence against Margaret Whitmore before the woman could strike again. The boarding house appeared unchanged from the outside, but Sarah Me now recognized the strategic positioning that allowed Margaret to monitor everyone's movements. Windows provided clear views of the main street, hotel, and merchant district. No significant activity escaped observation from this central location. Sarah Me approached Mrs. Henderson under cover of purchasing fabric for new dresses. The merchant's wife possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of town gossip that included details about longtime residents like Margaret. "Margaret came here about 15 years ago," Mrs. Henderson revealed while measuring ribbon. "Claimed to be a widow from back east, but she had money that didn't match her story. Bought the boarding house outright with cash." The timeline matched Annabelle's escape from their childhood circumstances. Margaret's arrival in Dusty Hollow corresponded precisely with when Annabelle would have been establishing her new identity with Thompson. Sarah Me pressed for additional details about Margaret's background, careful to frame her curiosity as simple interest in local history. Mrs. Henderson enjoyed sharing secrets, especially when they involved people she considered secretive. She never talks about her late husband, but she keeps a portrait in her private quarters. Some say he was a plantation owner down south who left her well provided for. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Margaret Whitmore was the plantation master's widow, the woman who had owned Sarah Mee and Anna Bell during their childhood years. She had followed them west seeking revenge for Anna Bell's escape and the theft that funded their sister's freedom. Sarah Mee's memory unlocked additional details about their childhood tormentor. The woman had taken particular interest in punishing the sisters for minor infractions, treating them as personal property rather than human beings deserving basic dignity. Anna Bell's diary entries about stolen jewelry now made perfect sense. Her sister had taken valuable items when she escaped, using them to fund her journey west and establish a new identity. Margaret considered this theft a personal affront that demanded punishment spanning decades. The boarding house records provided additional evidence when Sarah Mee convinced the town clerk to show her immigration documents. Margaret's arrival papers listed her previous residence as the same county where Sarah Mee remembered spending her childhood years. Thompson met Sarah Mee at the hotel after her investigation concluded. His expression reflected the same grim determination that had carried him through years of grief and uncertainty. The truth about their enemy's identity changed everything about their defensive strategy. "She's been planning this for 15 years, Sarah Mee explained, waiting for the right moment to destroy everything Anna Bell built. Margaret's patience impressed Sarah Mee despite her hatred for the woman. Most people seeking revenge acted impulsively, but Margaret had constructed an elaborate web of surveillance and manipulation that required exceptional dedication to sustained cruelty. The ranch attacks represented only the beginning of Margaret's ultimate plan. Sarah Mee realized that the woman intended to reclaim her as property, using falsified legal documents to reverse the freedom Anna Bell had died protecting. Sarah Mee's exceptional memory recalled fragments of legal terminology from documents she had glimpsed during her boarding house years. Margaret kept extensive paperwork in her private office, including items that seemed official despite their questionable authenticity. Thompson's business associates had been subtly influenced by Margaret's whispered suggestions about his questionable marriage choice. The woman had spent months poisoning public opinion, preparing the social groundwork for Sarah Mee's eventual downfall. "She's turned half the town against us without them realizing they're being manipulated," Thompson observed grimly. Margaret's boarding house served as headquarters for a campaign of psychological warfare that extended far beyond simple revenge. The woman had studied her targets thoroughly, identifying weaknesses and pressure points that could be exploited for maximum damage. Sarah Mee's investigation revealed the scope of Margaret's planning through small details that painted a larger picture. Guest records showed visits from men with questionable reputations, suggesting hired help for activities beyond Margaret's personal capabilities. The stolen jewelry that Anna Bell had taken remained at the center of Margaret's motivation. Sarah Mee found references to the items in Anna Bell's diary, including a detailed description of where they were hidden on the ranch property. Anna Bell had buried the jewelry beneath the oak tree behind the main house, intending to use the valuable items as emergency funds if she ever needed to flee again. The location remained secret, known only to Anna Bell and now to Sarah Mee through her sister's written confession. Margaret's true plan crystallized as Sarah Mee connected the remaining pieces. The woman intended to present legal documents claiming Sarah Mee as stolen property, using pre-Civil War ownership papers that she would claim remained valid despite changed circumstances. The approaching summer deadline from Thompson's original declaration carried new significance. Margaret planned to make her move when Sarah Mee would theoretically be giving birth, using the moment of maximum vulnerability to spring her carefully constructed trap. Thompson listened to Sarah Mee's analysis with growing anger at the scope of Margaret's deception. The woman had orchestrated years of suffering based on crimes that existed only in her twisted understanding of justice and property rights. She means to drag you back into captivity, Thompson concluded. Everything we've built together is just bait in her larger trap. Sarah Mee felt the weight of 15 years of planning pressing down on her shoulders. Margaret Whitmore had devoted her life to this revenge, constructing an elaborate web that now threatened to destroy everything Sarah Mee had found worth protecting. The time for investigation had ended. Margaret's true nature stood revealed, and her intentions promised escalation beyond property damage into direct action that would determine whether Sarah Mee remained free or returned to the nightmare Annabelle had died escaping. Margaret Whitmore arrived at the ranch with a delegation that included the territorial judge and 2 armed deputies. Her carriage kicked up dust clouds that announced her approach long before the party reached the main house. Sarah Mee watched from the window as her childhood tormentor finally revealed her true intentions. The falsified documents looked official enough to fool casual inspection. Margaret had spent years perfecting the paperwork that claimed ownership rights over Sarah Mee based on pre-Civil War property laws. The seals appeared authentic, the signatures convincing forgeries that might have succeeded against less prepared opposition. These papers establish clear ownership, Margaret announced to the assembled crowd that had gathered to witness the spectacle. This property was stolen from my late husband's estate 15 years ago. Sarah Mee stepped onto the porch with Thompson beside her, facing down the woman who had orchestrated years of suffering through patient manipulation. The moment demanded courage she had been building her entire life without realizing it. The town had gathered to watch justice being served, though most didn't understand they were witnessing the climax of a revenge plot decades in the making. Mrs. Henderson stood with her arms crossed, finally understanding why Margaret had asked so many questions about Thompson's marriage. Judge Morrison examined Margaret's documents with careful attention while Sarah Mee prepared her defense. Her years of secretly studying legal texts at the boarding house had prepared her for this moment, though she had never imagined the knowledge would be used to secure her own freedom. These ownership papers appear legitimate, the judge announced, causing murmurs of approval from Margaret's supporters in the crowd. Sarah Mee stepped forward with Annabelle's diary clutched against her chest. Her exceptional memory had cataloged every legal inconsistency in Margaret's forged documents, and her self-taught understanding of territorial law provided the weapons needed for her defense. Your Honor, I request permission to examine these documents more closely, Sarah Mee said with calm authority that surprised everyone present. Margaret's confident expression flickered as Sarah Mee approached the judge's table. The widow had expected submission, not legal challenge from someone she considered property rather than a person capable of mounting sophisticated defense. Sarah Mee pointed to the first inconsistency with steady fingers that betrayed none of her inner nervousness. These papers claim ownership under Louisiana territorial law, but the dates precede Louisiana's admission to the Union by several years. The judge frowned as he verified Sarah Mee's observation. The legal framework referenced in Margaret's documents hadn't existed during the time period she claimed, exposing the forgery through historical impossibility. Furthermore, Sarah Mee continued, the witness signatures include men who died before the alleged document creation date, according to territorial death records. Margaret's face drained of color as her carefully constructed lies crumbled under Sarah Mee's methodical examination. The woman had underestimated her target's intelligence, assuming ignorance would prevent effective resistance. Sarah Mee produced Annabelle's diary with reverent care, opening it to pages that detailed Margaret's husband's cruelty and the circumstances that justified her sister's escape. This journal documents the abuse that necessitated my sister's flight from captivity. The diary entries painted a picture of systematic cruelty that made Annabelle's theft seem like justified compensation rather than criminal activity. Margaret's husband had treated human beings as disposable property, earning the hatred that motivated Annabelle's desperate escape. The jewelry mentioned in these legal proceedings was taken as payment for years of unpaid labor and physical abuse. Sarah Mee explained to the increasingly sympathetic crowd. Margaret finally spoke, her voice cracking under the pressure of public exposure. Those items were stolen property, regardless of the circumstances. Sarah Mee walked to the oak tree behind the main house, followed by the entire assembly. Her memory of Annabelle's diary had preserved the exact location where her sister had buried the contested jewelry 15 years earlier. The small metal box emerged from the earth after minimal digging. Inside lay the jewelry that had funded Annabelle's freedom and sparked Margaret's decade-spanning revenge quest. The items glittered in the afternoon sunlight like symbols of liberation rather than theft. "I return these willingly," Sarah Mee announced, "in exchange for legal recognition that my sister's escape was justified and that I remain a free person under territorial law." Judge Morrison examined the jewelry while considering the legal arguments presented by both parties. Margaret's forged documents had been thoroughly discredited, while Sarah Mee's defense demonstrated both legal knowledge and moral authority that impressed everyone present. "The court finds these ownership claims invalid," the judge declared. "Mrs. Thompson remains a free citizen with all associated rights and protections." Margaret's supporters melted away as her deception became public knowledge. The woman who had manipulated town opinion for months now faced social ostracism, as her true nature stood exposed to community judgment. Thompson stepped beside Sarah Mee as Margaret's carriage disappeared toward town in defeated retreat. The crisis that had threatened their future together had instead strengthened their bond through shared adversity and mutual support. Sarah Mee's transformation from scorned outcast to respected community member was complete. Her intelligence and dignity had overcome prejudice and manipulation, earning recognition that transcended her appearance or background circumstances. 1 year later, Sarah Mee managed the territory's most successful ranch, while Thompson served as her devoted partner in all endeavors. Their adopted son, rescued from the orphanage after his parents died in a prairie fire, fulfilled Thompson's prophecy in ways that honored love over biology. The boy called them both parents with equal affection, proving that family bonds transcended blood relations when built on genuine care and mutual respect. Sarah Mee's journey from kitchen servant to ranch owner inspired other women to challenge social limitations through intelligence and perseverance. The summer sun cast long shadows across their prosperous land as Sarah Mee watched her son play in the yard where Annabelle's jewelry had once been buried. Freedom earned through courage and wisdom felt sweeter than anything inherited through accident of birth. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.